As the hateful whispers in the stands grew louder, Omar's fists clenched, and the guilty look in his son Kareem's eyes tore him apart inside. When the game ended and the crowd began to disperse, Coach Anderson's commanding voice echoed across the field. What he was about to say would leave a lasting mark on everyone present that day. Before the story starts, drop a comment. Which city are you watching from? And if you stand for justice and equality, share this story and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can make our voices stronger. The autumn sun hung low over Riverside Park soccer fields in Greendale, Pennsylvania, casting long shadows across the grass where the under-12 Wildcats practiced twice a week. Omar Hassan sat on the aluminum bleachers, his worn jacket pulled tight against October's chill, watching his 10-year-old son Kareem run drills with determination that made Omar's chest ache with pride and worry. 2 years had passed since they'd fled Gaza, leaving behind rubble and memories Omar wished he could forget. The refugee resettlement program brought them to this small Pennsylvania town where neighbors still looked twice at his Arabic features and Kareem's brown skin stood out among the predominantly white team. But soccer was supposed to be the universal language, the bridge helping his son belong. Omar had learned to make himself small in America. He worked night shifts at a warehouse, kept his head down, spoke quietly, tried not to draw attention. The last thing he wanted was trouble, especially at his son's soccer practice where other parents gathered in easy camaraderie of people who belonged. He sat alone on the bleacher's edge, as always, watching Kareem weave through cones with natural talent that made Coach Anderson's eyes light up during tryouts. But Omar noticed how other boys sometimes forgot to pass to Kareem, how their parents' conversations died when he approached, how birthday invitations went to every team member except his son. Today, 3 fathers sat 2 rows behind him, voices carrying clearly in crisp autumn air. Omar recognized them: Mike Brennan, whose son Tyler played defense; Jim Crawford, father of the team captain, and a new parent whose expensive SUV dominated the parking lot. I'm just saying, standards have really dropped. Mike's voice drifted forward, loud enough to ensure Omar heard. My taxes pay for this program, and now we're letting anyone join. Omar's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the field where Kareem had just executed a perfect corner kick. His son glanced toward the bleachers, seeking approval, and Omar forced a smile and thumbs up. You know what I heard? Jim Crawford added, voice dripping with false concern. These refugee families get everything handed to them: free housing, welfare, food stamps, while we're working our asses off to pay soccer fees. The third man laughed. My wife's cousin works at the resettlement center. She says they're bringing in thousands. Most probably have terrorist connections. How do we really know who these people are? Omar's hands clenched into fists. He'd heard variations of this conversation 100 times since arriving in America, at grocery stores, the DMV, even at the mosque where someone spray-painted, "Go home terrorists." But hearing it here, at his son's soccer practice, while Kareem played his heart out, made something inside Omar want to break. He thought about responding, about turning around and explaining he'd been a civil engineer in Gaza, that he'd rebuilt schools destroyed by bombs, that he'd fled not for handouts, but for his son's survival after the night their apartment building collapsed, killing Kareem's mother. He could explain that the free housing was a 1-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, that he worked 60-hour weeks at minimum wage, that Kareem's cleats came from a church donation bin. But Omar had learned that explaining himself to people who had already decided who he was only invited more pain. So he stayed silent, swallowing the burning words, focusing on his son's joy as the boy finally got the ball passed to him and took a shot sailing just wide of the goal. Did you see that? Mike Brennan's voice rose with mock surprise. The Arab kid almost scored. Maybe he's better at kicking bombs than balls. The 3 men erupted in laughter that felt like knives in Omar's back. He watched Kareem's shoulders slump slightly, the boy's eyes darting toward bleachers, checking if his father heard. Omar kept his expression neutral, but inside he was dying, watching his son learn that silence was sometimes the only safe response to hate. On the field, Coach Anderson was setting up a scrimmage. Kareem stood at attention, his small body radiating hope he'd be picked early. But as the coach called names, Kareem was chosen last. As almost always, his face struggling to maintain composure. At least they put him in defense, Jim Crawford observed. Less chance he can mess up. Though knowing his type, he might blow up under pressure. More laughter. Omar's fingernails cut into his palms. The scrimmage began, and Omar watched his son play with fierce determination, intercepting passes, making smart defensive decisions. When Kareem stole the ball and passed perfectly to Tyler Brennan, setting up an easy goal, Omar allowed himself hope that maybe the other boys would start to see his son's worth. But Tyler celebrated without acknowledging Kareem's assist, and when boys high-fived each other, Kareem stood alone, his hands still raised. "That kid needs to learn his place," the third father said. "Coming here, acting like he belongs. His people have caused problems for thousands of years, and now they want to bring that mentality here." Omar stood abruptly, unable to take another second. He started walking toward the parking lot, planning to wait in his car until practice ended. But as he descended the bleachers, he heard Kareem call out, "Baba, where are you going?" The Arabic word hung in the air like an accusation. Omar turned to see his son's face crumple with understanding, knowing exactly why his father was leaving, feeling responsible for the hatred directed at them both. That look on Kareem's face, shame mixed with resignation, made Omar stop. His son was learning to expect rejection, to accept discrimination as normal, to shrink himself to avoid confrontation. At 10 years old, Kareem was already learning survival skills that had kept Omar alive, but had also killed something essential in his spirit. Omar returned to his seat, meeting his son's eyes across the field and nodding firmly. "I'm staying. I'm not leaving you alone with this." The scrimmage continued, and so did the comments, each one more vicious. They speculated about Omar's immigration status, questioned whether he was really a refugee or just exploiting the system, suggested people like him were why America was going downhill. Omar sat rigid, enduring each verbal assault while his son played on, trying so hard to prove himself worthy of basic human dignity. Then it happened. A contested ball near the goal led to Kareem and Tyler Brennan colliding as both went for the header. It was normal soccer contact, but Tyler went down dramatically, clutching his knee, and Mike Brennan shot to his feet. That was deliberate. "That kid just took out my son." On the field, Coach Anderson was already heading toward the boys, but Mike Brennan wasn't waiting. He stormed down from the bleachers, pointing at Kareem. "This is exactly what I've been talking about. These people come here with their violence, their complete disregard for rules." Kareem stood frozen, face pale with fear, as Tyler's father approached. Omar was on his feet instantly, moving to protect his son, but Coach Anderson got there first. "Mr. Brennan, step back," the coach said firmly, his tall frame positioning between Mike and Kareem. It was a clean play. Both boys were going for the ball. Clean play? That terrorist's kid deliberately tried to injure my son. The word, terrorist, seemed to echo across the field. The other boys stopped playing, all eyes turning to watch. Parents from other fields started looking over. And Kareem stood there, tears streaming down his face. Omar reached his son, pulling Kareem close. "It's okay, Habibi. It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Coach Anderson helped Tyler to his feet. The boy was fine, already putting weight on his supposedly injured knee. "Tyler, you good to keep playing?" "Yeah, coach," Tyler mumbled, looking embarrassed by his father's overreaction. Mike Brennan wasn't done. "This is unacceptable. I want that kid off this team. If you don't remove him, I'm going to the league board. I'll make sure everyone knows you're prioritizing refugee quota filling over the safety of American children." The silence that followed was suffocating. All the other parents gathered now, forming a semicircle around the confrontation. Omar could feel their eyes on him, and Kareem could sense them weighing loyalties, deciding which side they would choose. Coach Anderson stood very still for a long moment. Then he blew his whistle, the sharp sound cutting through tension. "Everyone bring it in." Now, the boys jogged over, forming a circle. The parents moved closer too, unable to resist the pull of whatever was about to happen. Coach Anderson looked at each boy in turn, then at gathered parents, his gaze lingering longest on Mike Brennan and the other fathers who had been poisoning the air with their comments. "I've been coaching youth soccer for 15 years, he began, voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone stand straighter. "I've taught thousands of kids how to pass, defend, work as a team. But I've failed at teaching the most important lesson." He paused, eyes moving to Kareem, still pressed against his father's side. "I've failed to make it clear that on this team, we don't tolerate hatred. We don't tolerate discrimination. And we sure as hell don't tolerate racism." Mike Brennan started to object, but Coach Anderson held up his hand. "I heard what was said in those bleachers today. Every word. And I'm ashamed I didn't stop it immediately." He looked directly at Omar. "Mr. Hassan, I owe you and your son an apology. No one should endure what you've endured today." Omar felt his throat tighten, unable to speak. Coach Anderson turned to the boys. "Kareem Hassan is one of the most talented players on this team. He works harder than anyone at practice. He never complains. He shows up early and stays late. And you know what else? His father fled a war zone to give him a chance at a better life. That's not weakness. That's the strongest kind of courage there is." He let that sink in. If anyone here, parent or player, has a problem with Kareem being on this team, you're welcome to leave right now. But understand this. I will not coach a team that allows bigotry. I will not teach soccer to children who are learning to hate. The silence was absolute. No one moved. "Mr. Brennan," Coach Anderson said, voice hardening, "your son is welcome to stay on this team. But you are no longer welcome at practices or games. Your behavior today was unacceptable, and I will not expose these children to that toxicity." Mike Brennan's face turned red. "You can't do that. I pay for this program." "Actually, I volunteer for this program," Coach Anderson corrected. "And yes, I can. It's in the league's code of conduct. Any parent creating a hostile environment can be banned. Consider yourself officially banned." He pulled out his phone. "I'm also reporting this incident to the league board, not because Kareem did anything wrong, but because discrimination is a serious violation of our values." Jim Crawford and the third father went silent, their earlier bravado evaporating. Coach Anderson addressed the team again. "Tomorrow at practice, we're going to have a conversation about respect, about what it really means to be a team. The beautiful thing about soccer is that it belongs to the whole world. Some of the greatest players came from countries where they faced poverty, war, discrimination. They didn't let that stop them." He put his hand on Kareem's shoulder. "This young man has that same potential, and I'm going to make sure he gets every opportunity to develop it, in an environment where he's valued and respected." Kareem looked up at the coach with wide eyes, then at his father, who nodded encouragement. "Thank you, Coach," Omar managed to say, voice rough with emotion. Coach Anderson extended his hand, and Omar shook it, feeling the strength and sincerity in the grip. "No, thank you," the coach replied. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do what I should have done from the beginning. Create a team where every child knows they belong." As practice resumed, something had fundamentally shifted. The other boys included Kareem in their drills with new intentionality. Several parents approached Omar to apologize for their silence. Tyler Brennan, looking embarrassed but determined, passed the ball to Kareem repeatedly. Mike Brennan left the field, his protests falling on deaf ears. Jim Crawford and the third father slunk away quietly. But Omar stayed, watching his son play with a lightness that had been missing before, seeing Kareem laugh with his teammates, finally being allowed to just be a kid who loved soccer. That evening, Coach Anderson's speech was recorded by a parent and posted to social media. Within days, it had millions of views, sparking conversations about youth sports, immigration, and the responsibility of adults to model the values they claimed to hold. But for Omar and Kareem, the most important change was simpler. They had found a place where they belonged, where Kareem could play soccer without carrying the weight of representing his entire ethnic group, where Omar could sit in the bleachers without armor, without expecting attack. 3 months later, The Wildcats won their regional championship. Kareem scored the winning goal on an assist from Tyler Brennan, and the celebration that followed included everyone, united in joy that transcended divisions. As Omar lifted his son onto his shoulders, Kareem's championship medal gleaming in winter sun, he thought about all the fields where children like his son were still fighting for the right to simply belong. He thought about coaches and teachers and neighbors who chose silence over solidarity. But he also thought about Coach Anderson, about parents who had apologized, about boys who had learned that including others made them stronger. And he allowed himself to hope that maybe this was how change happened, one brave voice at a time, one soccer field at a time, one child learning they deserved dignity and respect.